Good morning, everybody. Justin Dunaway here with the Institute of Clinical Excellence, coming at you live on a cold Portland, Oregon morning, 5:30. And today I want to talk about two-point discrimination. I think we all learned this at some degree back in PT school. I know I did, not really in the context of persistent pain, but just in the neuro exam in general. So two-point discrimination is the threshold for determining when we can feel the difference between 1 point touching us and 2 points touching us. Right, and there's norms all over the body for where that threshold exists. Like in the low back, it's generally around 55 millimeters. Under 55 millimeters, everything feels like there's just 1 point touching me. But once we get past that, I can tell that it's two separate things. So that's two-point discrimination. Where it comes into play with persistent pain is we know that at least in some persistent pain, in our centrally dominant pain states, part of what's going on is maladaptive neuroplasticity, changes in structure and function of the nervous system. And these changes occur in the periphery, and these changes occur in the spinal cord, and these changes occur in the cortex. And these changes happen in lots of different places, but the spots that I want to focus on this morning are maladaptive neuroplastic changes in structure and function in the somatosensory cortex and the primary motor cortex. Call them cortical smudging. And we can measure these from a research perspective through lots of different imaging techniques. Functional MRI can show us changes in function. Transcranial magnetic stimulation brain mapping can show us changes in function. EEGs and different tests like that can show us changes in gray and white matter density. But we know that in persistent pain, we see these changes in brain tissue and how they function. Right, and when it comes to motor and sensory changes, we see changes in our ability to localize pain. We see changes in proprioception. We see increased pain thresholds, or decreased pain thresholds, things like that. And from a clinical standpoint, we can see the extent of some of these changes through tests like left-right discrimination, laterality testing. When we have maladaptive neuroplastic changes in the somatosensory cortex, we lose our ability to determine left from right in the painful body part. We also see changes in two-point discrimination. So in our chronic low back pain patient, that 55 millimeter threshold for two-point discrimination moves up to like 70, 75, 80. I've seen some that are 90, 95, 100. We also lose our ability to accurately identify shapes drawn on our body, graphesthesia. So these are really cool tests that we can do in the clinic to start to determine if we've got some neuroplastic changes in the somatosensory and motor cortex, if these are on board, and if these should be treatment targets. Mosley gave us a really cool case series called, I Can't Find It, Distorted Body Image and Tactile Dysfunction. And basically what he did is he took a bunch of people with chronic low back pain, some were bilateral, some were unilateral, some were left, some were right, and gave them kind of a dot drawing outline of a back and said, just trace these dots and draw your back. Don't draw what your back looks like, draw how your back feels. And what he found is that in patients with this pain, with this persistent pain, they struggled to complete the drawing. And in the areas where their pain were, they just stopped. They couldn't feel or sense or know where their body was in space. And then they did two-point discrimination along the spine on the left and the right side of the body and found that the areas where patients had trouble drawing, the areas where patients had persistent pain, they also had significant dysfunctions in two-point discrimination. So the theory is that correlates with the neuroplastic changes in the cortex. Harvey, 2018, tactile acuity is reduced in people with chronic neck pain. So Harvey, this is in print, so it'll come out next year. And a big shout out to Jordan Berry for sending this article to me the other day. But this is a really cool study that looked at two-point discrimination, point-to-point discrimination, and graphesthesia in chronic neck pain patients and compared them to non-neck pain patients. And a couple things that were cool. First, they looked at patients with whiplash pain versus patients with idiopathic pain, and found that that there were no difference in those two groups. So the pain was pain in those two groups. The other thing that they found was pretty cool is that 2-point discrimination in your chronic neck pain patients was dysfunctional at the neck, was also dysfunctional in the pain-free arm, and was also dysfunctional in the pain-free back. Whereas graphesthesia was also dysfunctional in the neck, but not at the distant sites. So what we see here is that that this dysfunction in 2-point discrimination, this dysfunction in cortical mapping, seems to not just be localized to the area of pain or dysfunction, but it also seems to be dysfunctional on more of a systemic level. The other thing that was really interesting is the level of error with your 2-point discrimination seemed to correlate with your pain intensity and the duration of your symptoms. So the longer the symptoms went on, the worse your 2-point discrimination was. So let's take this one step further and look at treating it. Adrian Lowe gave us a cool study called Immediate Effects of Sensory Discrimination for Chronic Low Back Pain. And this is another case series where they took a bunch of patients with chronic low back pain, measured their pain, measured their forward flexion, and then all he did was explain just a little bit about how cortical smudging works and somatosensory homunculus, and then put them supine and just did 5 minutes of tactile discrimination training. So they just superimposed a 3x3 square on the back, or a 3x3 grid on the back. Each one had a number, and then just said, where am I touching now? 3, great. Where am I touching now? 6, 9, 2, 1. And we just went like that. So the patient had to actively think about where they're feeling the sensations, and then train, correct versus incorrect. And what he found is that after 5 minutes of training that, you had immediate changes in front flexion and immediate changes in pain without doing any movement or really any manual therapy or anything like that. So just working on discerning, cleaning up that cortical smudging seemed to have an immediate change in pain and front flexion. Now, what they didn't do, they didn't measure tactile discrimination or 2-point discrimination before or after, so we don't know if that changed anything. But what we know is that the patient was able to move better. So there's not a ton of great research looking at using 2-point discrimination or using tactile training to decrease pain and improve function, other than Lowe's article. But I think it's enough that it's worth looking at in the clinic, right? There are norms that have been researched pretty much all over the body for where we should see our 2-point discrimination thresholds, and I will post that in the feed below this post here shortly. But I think that in the clinic, we should be, with our patients with some persistent pain, we should be looking at laterality, and we should be looking at 2-point discrimination. And if we see some of these things on board, especially in our patients that come in that are really fearful, that are really painful, and are unwilling or unable to do a lot of movement, this may be a great place that we can kind of crack the door open, that we can calm down the system, that we can start cleaning up some motor firing patterns and get them moving towards some graded exposure towards these fearful movements. Tactile acuity training is fun. It's we can make games out of it. Graphesthesia is cool. You can spell words, do all kinds of shapes in the back. But it's also a really fun HEP because you can get family involved, and husbands and wives and partners and kids to play the graphesthesia, the drawn on mom's back game. And what's also nice is that it gives us some really nice objective measures where we can show change. We can show change early on, and we can use that change to really enhance our therapeutic alliance and get some patient buy-in, showing them that we're making changes in their nervous system. So if you guys aren't looking at tactile discrimination and some sensory discrimination training in your clinic, I'd suggest with our persistent pain patients, let's get in there and experiment with this a little bit. These calipers here, you can hop on Amazon. I bought this for $15 on Amazon. I use it every day in the clinic. I love this thing. They're super easy to use, digital calipers, and like I said, it's really nice to be able to show patients a number and then show them that number change, because then they get really excited about this stuff. So With all that being said, with these persistent pain patients, let's get in there. Let's start looking at 2-point discrimination. I'll post the norms in the thread below. Let's get in and do some tactile discrimination training and see if we can make a difference in some of these really difficult persistent pain patients. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.